Ads on YouTube are super annoying. It seems like every year the ads just get longer and longer, and YouTube allows creators to stuff in more and more ads into their videos. Given the massive size of YouTube and Alphabet, you would think that YouTube could place greater emphasis on the user experience as opposed to the financial aspect. But this is actually not the case. In fact, YouTube has burnt money for the majority of their existence. So here's YouTube's money problem and why they struggle to break even with all those pesky ads. Starting off, YouTube is extremely lenient when it comes to who can upload onto their site. The only requirements are really just having an internet connection and a YouTube account. This is honestly what makes YouTube so awesome. There's basically no entry cost and anyone can give it a shot. However, from a business perspective, this gets kind of messy. At the end of 2020, Social Blade estimated that there were a total of 38 million YouTube channels with at least 5 subscribers. Something to keep in mind is that Social Blade only tracks channels that have been searched for on their website. So the real number is even higher than that. Approximately 20 million of these channels have less than 100 subscribers, and 12 million channels have between 100 and 1,000 subscribers. Given that you need a minimum of 1,000 subscribers to get monetized, around 32 million of the 38 million channels on YouTube are not monetized. On top of this, in 2016, a German researcher found that the top 3% of channels got 85% of the views, while the bottom 97% only got 15% of the views. I don't think this statistic has really changed much since then, which means that YouTube has to run their entire ecosystem off of just a very small percentage of their content. Now, the top 3% of channels likely post much more frequently than the other 97%, so their content likely occupies more than 3% of YouTube's overall content, but I think you get the point. The first cost that comes along with hosting so much content is, of course, storage. Every single minute, 500 hours of content was being uploaded to YouTube as of May 2019. If YouTube actually kept the content in the same form it was uploaded, the data requirements would be ludicrous. But YouTube has perfected their data compression algorithms, and this helps YouTube substantially reduce their data needs. Let's look at a video from Graham Stephan, for instance. His videos generally consist of him talking with some images and text here and there. I doubt that the average video uploaded to YouTube has the same production quality as Graham, whether that be his lighting or his aesthetic backgrounds. However, I do think that the average video on YouTube uses the same style as Graham, so we'll use him as the benchmark. One of his most recent videos is a 16-minute 1080p video. Such videos generally boast a size of 100 megabytes per minute of video, so this video should be about 1.6 gigabytes when exported. However, if we try to download it from YouTube, we'll see that the size is only 150.6 megabytes for 1080p and 55.9 megabytes for 720p. Nowadays, basically every single smartphone is capable of recording at least 720p and oftentimes 4K. So I'm going to assume that the average video uploaded to YouTube is somewhere between 720p and 1080p. To keep it simple, we'll say that 15 minutes of video consumes about 100 megabytes of space. And now comes the hard part, which is estimating how much total storage YouTube is consuming. To estimate this, we'll use some logistic regression along with a bit of calculus. Over the years, we have a bunch of data points regarding how much content was being uploaded to YouTube. For example, when YouTube was launched, 0 hours of content was being uploaded every minute. 8 years in, 100 hours of content was being uploaded every minute. 14 years in, 500 hours of content was being uploaded every minute, and so on and so forth. If we graph this logistic regression curve, this is what we get. As you can see, the graph starts off slow, but then it rises exponentially before tapering off. This regression actually makes 506 hours uploaded per minute the ceiling. In reality, the taper is likely nowhere near as aggressive, so if anything, we're underestimating the total content on YouTube. If we take the integral between year 0 and year 16, we get 3,444 hours. This means that if we add up how much content was uploaded in 1 minute in 2005, with how much content was uploaded in 1 minute in 2006, with how much content was uploaded in 1 minute in 2007, and so on and so forth, we get 3,444 hours. If we convert that to an annual basis, we get a total of 1.8 billion hours of content being uploaded to YouTube. In most cases, once a video is uploaded onto YouTube, it's never deleted. So we'll assume that 90% of the content uploaded onto YouTube is still here, which gives us 1.62 billion hours of content. But that's not it, as we also have to account for redundancy. YouTube can't just save every single uploaded video once, as this would make them vulnerable for losing the video if something were to happen to the server that the video is stored on. And I'm sure Google does not want to end up like MySpace, who lost 12 years worth of music uploads. Now, Google has had a handful of instances where they lost data. In 2015, for instance, a lightning strike wiped out power at a Belgium cloud storage facility. Google ended up losing 0.000001% of the data stored in the facility. However, no customers lost any data permanently because the data was replicated across multiple servers. So I feel pretty confident in saying that every single video uploaded on YouTube has at least one redundant copy. Meanwhile, the most popular content likely has dozens of copies around the world to make streaming to viewers as seamless as possible. To keep things simple, we'll say that the 3% of content that drives most of the views to YouTube are saved 10 times, while the other 97% of content is only saved 2 times. This translates to a total of 3.62 billion hours of content, or 1.45 trillion megabytes of data. That's the same as 1.45 exabytes of data. According to Wasabi, the 5-year cost of storing 1 petabyte of data is $1.97 million. This includes everything from the hardware, the annual maintenance, and the software, to the electricity costs, the cooling costs, and the payroll. YouTube obviously has outstanding economies of scale working for them, so we'll say that their costs are only half of that at $1 million per petabyte for 5 years, or $200K per year. That comes out to $290 million, or about $300 million per year in terms of storage costs. Moving on, we have the biggest cost for YouTube by far, which is bandwidth. In 2017, the VP of Engineering at YouTube revealed that YouTube hit 1 billion hours of watch time per day in 2016. It's been 5 years since then, and the popularity of YouTube hasn't really slowed down, especially with the pandemic. I bet people were watching 3 billion hours of YouTube per day even before the pandemic started, but we'll estimate with 1 billion first to produce a lowball estimate. Streaming at just 480p for an hour uses up 562.5 megabytes of data. 720p is 1.86 gigabytes per hour. 1080p is 3.04 gigabytes per hour. And 4K is a whopping 15.98 gigabytes per hour. If you've ever streamed over cellular data, I'm sure you're well aware of this. Again, if we assume that the average viewer is watching at 720 or 1080p, we get about 2.5 gigabytes per hour of streaming. Factor in 1 billion hours of streaming per day, and we get 2.5 billion gigabytes per day. That's the same as 20 trillion megabits per day. If we translate that to a per second basis, we get 231 million megabits per second. According to Ace Data Centers, they charge $3.50 per megabit per second per month if you're using 1000 megabits per second. YouTube is using way more than that, so we'll assume that it only costs YouTube $1 per megabit per second per month. That comes out to $231 million per month, or $2.77 billion per year. If we use the more realistic estimate of 3 billion hours per day, this number jumps to $693 million per month, or a whopping $8.3 billion per year. Add the $300 million cost of storage, and we get $8.6 billion per year. The last major cost we have to account for is payroll. As of April 2018, Fortune reported that YouTube had a total of 1,100 employees. The median salary itself at Google was $246,000 per year as of 2019. For 1,100 employees, that comes out to $270 million, which raises YouTube's total operating cost to $8.87 billion. On top of this, YouTube also has a bunch of miscellaneous expenses such as lawsuits, advertising, production costs, licensing costs, their office building, and so much more. We'll say that all of these miscellaneous costs add up to a little over $1 billion per year, meaning that it costs about $10 billion per year to run YouTube. But as you might have noticed, all of the numbers we used for this estimate are pre-pandemic numbers. The latest data point we have is May of 2019, so I think $10 billion is more reflective of how much it cost to run YouTube right before the pandemic started. For the longest time, Google did not reveal any of the financial numbers behind YouTube, and they still don't reveal the costs of running YouTube or the final profit. However, at the beginning of 2020, Google started revealing the total revenue from YouTube for the first time. They revealed that YouTube pulled in a total of $15.15 billion in revenue in 2019 and $11.16 billion in revenue in 2018. YouTube introduced back-to-back ads at the end of 2018, so I suspect that the majority of the sudden increase in revenue was simply due to showing more ads. Considering this, if we assume that the cost of running YouTube was approximately the same for both years at $10 billion, we would see that YouTube made $1 billion in 2018 and $5 billion in 2019. Before 2018 though, YouTube was either losing money or basically breaking even. Personally, I have a feeling that Google started to report YouTube's revenue as soon as it actually became profitable. This would mean that 2019 was YouTube's first fully profitable year. Since then though, YouTube has become a cash cow for Google thanks to the pandemic. In 2020, YouTube pulled in $20 billion due to increased viewership. And even if operating expenses ballooned to $15 billion, YouTube walked away with at least $5 billion. This year, YouTube's prospects are looking even brighter, as YouTube is projected to pull in $29 to $30 billion in revenue. That probably translates to upwards of $10 billion in profit. If we give YouTube the same PE ratio as Google, YouTube would boast a valuation of $270 billion. Given that YouTube was burning hundreds of millions, if not billions per year for the first decade though, it's unclear if Google is in the green with YouTube overall. At this point though, it's just a matter of time, and it's no question that YouTube was an incredible acquisition for Google. Did you guys realize that YouTube was losing money for most of its lifetime? Comment that down below. Also, drop a like if you're extremely grateful that Google propped up YouTube. And of course, consider joining our Discord community to suggest future video ideas, and consider subscribing to see more questions logically answered. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.